Answer.
Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here, and trying to get the straight scoop on what kind of lasting damage the airstrikes against the Iranian nuclear program had. We heard earlier in the week from an Iranian foreign minister, actually our friend Brett Baer interviewed Abbas Araghchi, Iranian foreign minister, who said this in response to Brett Baer's question to that end.
What is the extent of the damage to the nuclear enrichment program after these attacks?
Well, our facilities have been damaged, seriously damaged, the extent of which is now under evaluation by our Atomic Energy Organization. But as far as I know, they are seriously damaged. We need a new modality because the facilities have been destroyed.
Does Iran plan to reconstitute its enrichment program? Is it continuing now, or has the damage been so severe that it is all stopped?
It is now stopped because, yes, damages are serious and severe.
He said damages are serious and severe. Then he said destroyed. The nuclear enrichment program has stopped because of the damage inflicted. Now, of course, when you have an adversary who you don't believe because they lie about everything, then you can't take them at their word, even if they're telling something you hope is true either. I think that's sort of the Reagan trust but verify paradigm. So what do we know and what do we think the Iranians are trying to do? Perhaps say the damage is more substantial than it is for the purposes of having America gaze elsewhere. Perhaps not. For more on this topic and other geopolitical matters, we're pleased to be joined by former ambassador to the UN and assistant to the president for national security affairs, also the author of The Room Where It Happened, a White House memoir. He is John Bolton. John Bolton, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Glad to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So what's your assessment of the Iranian foreign minister's assessment?
Well, the point you made about disinformation, I think, is one you always have to take seriously. Interesting, back in Iran, Araghchi, the foreign minister, has been very heavily criticized for telling the truth. Now, that may be part of the disinformation campaign as well, but I think his assessment is actually pretty accurate. We don't know everything yet, and we're not going to have people on the ground who can do the kind of assessment we'd like. But I think it's fair to say that that the three sites that the U.S. attacked, Israel attacked many more sites, but of the three sites that the U.S. and Israel both attacked, the program has been set back enormously. People talk about uranium enrichment. That's what Brett Baer's questions were about. Building a nuclear weapon is a lot more complicated than simply enriching the uranium, which itself is a very difficult process. And one of the things about the way the Israelis struck, compounded with our bunker busters and Tomahawk cruise missiles, was that the strike was against the whole range of activity that Iran or any other country has to go through to build a nuclear weapon. And by destroying or severely damaging the program in many, many places, you really make it extraordinarily difficult to put back together. Can the Iranians find a few hundred centrifuges, perhaps at Natanz, they can start spinning tomorrow? Sure, that's fine. But once you spin the uranium to weapons-grade levels of the U-235 isotope, you can't make a nuclear weapon with gas. You have to reconvert the gas into a metal. And those facilities, we believe, the Israelis destroyed at Esfahan. So the totality of the strike, and frankly, we didn't go far enough. I wish Trump hadn't halted after he did. But what was accomplished was very significant. And
what about the response, the typical sort of merely a flesh wound response from the mullahs? The fatwas, the assassination program. I mean, I remember that piece on 60 Minutes from, it had to be a year or two ago, where you were one of those featured as somebody who had been targeted for elimination by the Iranians, and of course we had an assassination plot associated with the President Trump, that was foiled earlier this year. What are we to make of Iran's ability to retaliate in sort of one-off terrorist attacks or assassination attempts?
Well, I think it's very real, and this is part of their terrorist approach to things, that they're going to get revenge one way or another, and from Trump on down, people they associate with the U.S. strike against Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Quds Force, their external army, back in January of 2020, are still on that list, and that's the latest update. So, but they're also threatening Iranian Americans, people who have campaigned against the regime in the U.S., in Europe. And it's something that shows the nature of the regime in Tehran, what the Ayatollahs really think. They'll be happy to negotiate some new nuclear deal. They don't have any more intention of keeping their word on that than they did on the Obama deal of 2015, or of forswearing terrorism. It's a very dangerous regime, and I don't think there's any real prospect for peace in the Middle East until that regime ends its existence. We don't know when that will be. I hope it will be soon.
I wanted to get your reaction, shockingly, to this piece in the Washington Post documenting the financial struggles of an Iranian proxy, that would be Hamas. Early in the war, Hamas relied on taxes imposed on commercial shipments and the seizure of humanitarian goods, according to Gazans and current and former Israeli and foreign officials. According to a Gazan who has worked at the border, plainclothes Hamas personnel routinely took inventory of goods at the Rafah crossing until it closed last year, and at the Karim Shalom crossing, though it was under IDF control. They also surveyed warehouses and markets. Most of the Palestinians interviewed for the story spoke either on the condition of anonymity or only that their first name be used for fear of reprisal by Hamas. What the story documents is Hamas subsisting over pilfering humanitarian aid, even as they and the Western press are accusing the Israelis of starving the Gazans.
Right. This is a very important piece of reporting by the Washington Post. You know, it shows just how cynical and brutal Hamas is. But it also shows why simply getting assistance into the Gaza Strip isn't the end of the story. Hamas, for years now, has controlled the distribution pretty much of everything coming in. Make sure their fighters are equipped first, then selling other aspects of it, making sure their supporters and the civilian population are taken care of first. And they continue doing that, taking this humanitarian assistance given by the U.S. and others to UN agencies or non-governmental organizations like the Red Cross, that kind of thing, and then using control over food, medicine, and other basic human needs to control the Gazan population. This is nothing new. Saddam Hussein did exactly the same thing after the first Gulf War through what was called the Oil for Food program that people may recall, found to be extraordinarily corrupt across the board, but used as an instrument to control the Iraqi population by Saddam Hussein. And Hamas has been doing the same thing. This violates fundamental principles of American humanitarian assistance, going back to Herbert Hoover in World War I and the Committee for Relief in Belgium. We don't allow Hamas or the Germans, in the case of Belgium in World War I, to control the distribution of the humanitarian assistance. And so blaming everything on the Israelis is a total distortion of what's actually going on. I think a lot of the current turmoil is caused by Hamas, which is desperately trying to get control over the distribution of food and other things inside Gaza to get its revenue sources back.
I know we're short on time with you, but do you have time for one more?
Sure.
The piece that you wrote in the Wall Street Journal, I know you don't write the titles, but the piece was entitled "Trump Arms Ukraine but Still Wants Out." I think that's a fairly accurate reflection of your the tone of your piece. So is that wrong, that he should arm Ukraine but still want out?
Well, I think he's trying to extricate himself from Ukraine. He obviously was not able to persuade what he thought was his good friend Vladimir Putin to agree to a ceasefire, not just not failing to do it in 24 hours, as he said during the campaign. That was never going to happen, but unable to do it even over 6 months. He didn't want to retreat. He didn't want to appear weak. It was the right decision to get these patriots to the Ukrainians. But it also gives him cover and a 50-day ultimatum to Putin. Look, in the war in Ukraine, that's a lifetime to divert people's attention elsewhere, and then he doesn't have to dwell on the failure to get the ceasefire. That's what I think is really going on here.
And can Ukraine survive another 50 days if they do get the Patriots in a timely manner?
Yeah, the key question is, will Trump also continue to supply other military assistance, weapons, ammunition, and particularly the intelligence we supply that the Europeans can't duplicate? If that gets cut off after this 50-day period, or whenever it gets cut off, if it does, that is very bad news for Ukraine's survival. John Bolton is former assistant to the president for national security affairs and author of The Room Where It Happened, a White House memoir. Ambassador Bolton, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Thanks again for having me.
And he joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
You know what really keeps me up at night? It's the criminals feel more and more bold.